I was desperate for a job, any job. Scrolling through endless listings, one caught my eye: night security guard, Old Blackwood Library. Excellent pay, minimal duties. It sounded too good to be true, but my bank account was screaming at me, so I applied. The interview was weird. It was over the phone with a man who sounded ancient, his voice like rustling dry leaves. He didn't ask about my experience or qualifications, he just read me a list of rules. You must arrive no later than 10 p.m. You must leave no earlier than 6 a.m. Never, under any circumstances, leave the main reading room between midnight and 3 a.m. And most importantly, he paused, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper, do not go into the basement. My first night was uneventful. The library was huge, ancient, and smelled of old paper and dust. I sat at the main desk, watching the security monitors, which showed static-filled views of empty hallways. I read a book, drank stale coffee from my thermos, and counted the minutes until 6 a.m. The strangest thing was the silence. It was a heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to swallow sound. Around midnight, I started my patrol. The moonlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, casting long, spooky shadows that danced and twisted as I walked. The shelves were packed with books bound in dark leather, their spines faded and cracked. It felt like walking through a tomb. I remembered the rule: stay in the main reading room between midnight and 3 a.m. It was 12:30. I figured one quick patrol wouldn't hurt. I was just being thorough, right? That's when I heard it. A faint, rhythmic tapping. It seemed to be coming from the west wing, a section of the library that was roped off. Curiosity got the better of me. I ducked under the velvet rope and followed the sound down a long, dark corridor. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. It led me to a heavy oak door at the very end of the hall. There was no handle, just a small, tarnished brass plaque that read Special Collections. The tapping was coming from inside. Tap, tap, tap. I pressed my ear against the cold wood. Silence. Then, a whisper, so faint I thought I imagined it. It sounded like my name. A chill snaked its way down my spine. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. I practically sprinted back to the main desk, my bravado gone. I didn't leave that chair again until the first rays of dawn painted the sky. The next few nights, I followed the rules. I stayed glued to my chair from midnight to 3 a.m., trying to ignore the strange noises that echoed through the empty building. A book falling from a shelf in an empty aisle, the faint sound of pages turning. A soft giggle that seemed to come from right behind me. I told myself it was just the old building settling, my mind playing tricks on me in the dead of night. But the feeling of being watched never left. It was a constant, prickling sensation on the back of my neck. One night, around 2 a.m., one of the security monitors flickered to life. For a split second, it showed a clear image of the children's section. In the center of the room, a rocking horse was swaying back and forth, slowly at first, then faster and faster, as if an invisible child were riding it. Then the screen went back to static. My blood ran cold. I started to get jumpy. Every creak, every shadow made me flinch. I was barely sleeping during the day, haunted by the oppressive atmosphere of the library. I thought about quitting, but the pay was just too good to give up. I told myself I just had to make it through a few more weeks. On my 5th night, the power went out. The entire library was plunged into absolute darkness, and the emergency lights didn't kick on. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking so much I could barely turn on the flashlight. Its beam cut a weak path through the inky blackness. I was completely alone, trapped in this massive, silent tomb. And then I heard it again, the tapping, but this time, it wasn't coming from the west wing. It was coming from downstairs, from the basement. The one place I was explicitly told not to go. The sound was rhythmic, steady, tap, tap, tap. It was a lure. I knew it was. Every instinct screamed at me to stay put, to wait for the power to come back on. But the tapping was hypnotic. It pulled at me, a siren's call from the depths of the library. And then, a new sound joined the tapping, a scraping sound. Like fingernails dragging across a wooden door. My breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't stay here, in the open. I had to find a place to hide. My flashlight beam danced across the room, finally landing on a small door behind the main desk, marked staff only. I had never opened it before. With my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I scrambled towards it, pulled it open, and slipped inside, shutting it quietly behind me. I was in a small, cramped office. It was musty and filled with old filing cabinets. I leaned against the door, trying to control my breathing. The scraping sound was louder now, closer. It was just outside the office door. Scraw sop. I held my breath, praying whatever was out there would move on. Silence. After what felt like an eternity, the scraping stopped. I let out a slow, shaky breath. Maybe it was gone. Then the doorknob began to turn. Slowly, deliberately. I watched in frozen horror as the brass knob clicked and the door started to creak open. I backed away, pressing myself against the far wall, my phone's flashlight beam trembling in my hand. The door swung open to reveal nothing, just the pitch-black main room. Relief washed over me, so intense it made my knees weak. I had imagined it. It was just the old building, the lack of sleep. I stepped out of the office, sweeping my flashlight beam across the room. Empty. I started to laugh, a hysterical, choked sound. I was losing my mind. That's when I saw it. On the floor, leading from the basement door, were wet, muddy footprints. They were long and unnaturally thin, not human. And they led directly to the staff office I had just been hiding in. They stopped right in front of the door. Then, they turned and led back towards the basement. My blood turned to ice. It hadn't been outside the door. It had been inside the room with me. I didn't wait for the power to come back on. I didn't wait for 6 a.m. I ran. I burst out of the library's main doors and didn't stop running until the city lights were a comforting glow around me. I never went back. I never collected my last paycheck. Some rules aren't meant to be broken, and some doors are best left unopened. I still have nightmares about that tapping sound and the feeling of something cold and unseen standing right behind me in the dark. Thank you for watching. If you have a scary story you'd like to share, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more spooky tales. Stay safe out there.
Have you ever noticed how quiet your neighborhood gets at night? Like, really quiet? I used to love it. The peace, the stillness, but that was before last Tuesday. Now, the silence terrifies me. It started like any other night. I was up late, binge-watching some old sci-fi show. My window was cracked open to let in the cool autumn air. The usual night sounds were there: the distant hum of the highway, a dog barking a few streets over, the rustle of leaves. Around 11:55 p.m., I glanced at the clock, thinking I should probably head to bed. I decided to watch just one more episode. Big mistake. At exactly midnight, everything stopped. And I mean everything. The highway hum vanished. The dog went silent mid-bark. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. It wasn't just quiet. It was a void, a thick, heavy blanket of absolute nothingness. My ears started to ring from the sheer lack of sound. I paused my show, and the silence that filled the room was so intense it felt like a physical pressure. At first, I thought maybe it was just me. Maybe my ears were acting up. I stood up and walked to the window, peering out into the darkness. The street lights cast their usual orange glow on the empty street. Everything looked normal. Mrs. Gable's prize-winning roses were still there. My neighbor Tom's ridiculously oversized truck was parked in his driveway. But something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. I strained my ears, listening for anything. A cricket, a car, a far-off siren. Nothing. It was like the entire world had been put on mute. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I pulled out my phone and texted my friend who lives across town. "Hey, is it super quiet where you are?" No reply. That wasn't too unusual. He could be asleep. Then I tried to call him. The call wouldn't connect. No service. My phone screen read. That was weird. I always have full bars here. I checked my Wi-Fi. Gone. The little icon was just an empty triangle. Now the unease was turning into real fear. I felt completely cut off. I decided to check on my neighbors. I crept to my front door, my heart pounding in my chest. The silence made every tiny sound I made seem deafening: the creak of the floorboards, the click of the deadbolt. I slowly opened the door and stepped out onto my porch. The air was unnaturally still and cold. No breeze, no movement. Looking up and down the street, I saw that all the houses were dark except for the faint glow of a few porch lights. It was just after midnight. Some people should still be up. But there were no lights on inside any of the houses. Not a single TV flicker, not a single lamp in a window. It was as if everyone had gone to bed at the exact same moment. I walked to the edge of my lawn, my bare feet cold on the dew-kissed grass. The silence was so profound I felt like I could hear my own blood pumping. I called out, "Hello, is anyone there?" My voice sounded small and weak, swallowed by the immense quiet. No answer. I shouted louder, "Hey, Tom, you awake?" Nothing. Just the echo of my own voice, which seemed to die unnaturally fast. Panic started to set in. I ran across the street to Tom's house and banged on his door. "Tom, it's me. Open up," I yelled, my fists hammering against the wood. The sound was jarring, explosive in the stillness. I waited, listening, not a sound from inside. No dog barking, no annoyed shuffling, nothing. I tried the doorknob, locked. I went to the window and peered in. It was pitch black. I did the same at Mrs. Gable's house and then the Millers. The same result everywhere. Locked doors, dark windows, and an unnerving, tomb-like silence. It was like the entire neighborhood had been evacuated in an instant, leaving everything behind. But that made no sense. Where did they go? Why was there no warning? As I stood in the middle of the street, shivering, a new sound finally broke the silence. It was faint at first, a soft, rhythmic scraping. Scrape ... scrape ... scrape ... It was coming from the far end of the block, down by the old oak tree at the entrance to the cul-de-sac. My fear was screaming at me to run back inside, lock my door, and hide. But a morbid curiosity, a desperate need for answers, pulled me forward. I started walking towards the sound, staying in the shadows cast by the houses. Each step felt like a gamble. The scraping got louder, more defined. It was the sound of metal on asphalt. Scrape ... drag ... scrape ... drag ... It was slow, deliberate, and it sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. As I got closer, a figure came into view under the street light near the oak tree. It was tall and gaunt, unnaturally so. Its limbs were long and spindly, moving with a jerky, disjointed rhythm. It was dragging something behind it, something large and heavy. I ducked behind a hedge, my breath caught in my throat. The figure stopped its scraping and stood perfectly still, its head tilting from side to side as if listening. But there was nothing to listen to except my own frantic heartbeat. It was wearing what looked like old, tattered work clothes, but its shape was all wrong, too thin, too tall. Its head was small and round, and even from this distance, I could see it had no discernible features. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just a smooth, pale surface. It then bent down in a fluid, unnatural motion and picked up what it had been dragging. It was a person. I couldn't tell who it was, but they were limp, unmoving. The tall figure slung the body over its shoulder with an ease that was terrifying. It then turned and began to walk, not down the street, but directly towards the woods that bordered our neighborhood. I was frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. As the figure reached the edge of the woods, it didn't just walk in, it unfolded, its limbs stretched and contorted, its body elongating until it was no longer remotely human-shaped. It became a shadowy, multi-limbed creature that flowed into the darkness of the trees like ink spilling into water, taking its silent victim with it. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the sound returned. The hum of the highway, the chirping of crickets, the gentle rustle of the wind in the trees. It all came back at once, flooding the silence. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my friend. "Sorry, fell asleep. What's up?" "It's not quiet here. A car alarm is going off, LOL. I looked at the clock on my phone, 12:03 a.m. The entire event, the crushing silence, the horrifying figure, had lasted only 3 minutes. I stumbled back to my house, my mind reeling. I locked the door, bolted every window, and sat in the dark, shaking. The next morning, the neighborhood was back to normal. People were leaving for work, kids were waiting for the school bus, Mrs. Gable was watering her roses. I asked Tom if he heard me banging on his door last night. He just laughed and said he slept like a log. No one noticed anything. No one was missing, but I know what I saw. I know that for 3 minutes, my neighborhood was taken somewhere else, and something came to visit. Now, every night as the clock nears midnight, I don't feel peace in the quiet. I feel a primal dread. I turn on every light in the house. I play music loudly, anything to fight off the silence. Because I know that when the neighborhood goes quiet, they are listening, and they are hunting, and I do'n't know if they lines remember which house was the only one with a light on. Thanks for watching. If you have a story like this, share it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales from the dark. Stay safe.
Have you ever had an online friend who just seemed a little off? Someone who got too clingy too fast? I did. His name was Alex, or at least that's what he called himself. We met in a niche online forum dedicated to obscure indie horror films. At first, our conversations were great. We'd talk for hours about our favorite directors, dissecting plot twists and camera angles. It felt like I'd finally found someone who got my obsession. He was charming, funny, and seemed to know exactly what to say. We messaged every day, and soon our chats drifted from movies to our personal lives. I told him about my classes, my part-time job at the campus library, and my tiny, one-bedroom apartment. He told me he was a freelance graphic designer, working from home. He never talked much about his family or where he lived, always keeping it vague, saying he preferred to live in the digital world. I thought it was just quirky, you know, an artist thing. But then things started to get weird. He'd message me at all hours. If I didn't reply within a few minutes, I'd get a flood of messages. "Are you okay? Did I say something wrong? Why are you ignoring me?" It felt less like concern and more like an accusation. He started making comments about my other online friends, asking why I was talking to them and not him. He'd get jealous if I mentioned hanging out with my real-life friends. One day I posted a picture of myself and my friend Chloe at a cafe downtown. A few minutes later, a message from Alex popped up. "The coffee at the Daily Grind is always a bit burnt, isn't it? You should try the place Documentos across the street next time." I froze. I had never told him the name of the cafe. I hadn't even tagged the location. I scrolled back through my post, my heart pounding. There was no clue, no sign, nothing. When I asked him how he knew, he just replied with a winky face emoji and said, "I just know things." That was the turning point. The quirkiness wasn't charming anymore. It was creepy. He started sending me gifts, digital gift cards for stores near my apartment, links to articles about events happening on my campus. It was like he was trying to prove he was watching me, that he was a part of my physical world, even though I'd never given him my address. The final straw was when he sent me a message that said, "Your new haircut looks great. The bangs really suit you." I had gotten my hair cut that afternoon and hadn't posted any pictures. I hadn't told anyone. I felt sick. My safe online space had been invaded. I typed out a long, firm message telling him his behavior was making me uncomfortable and that I needed space. His reply was instant and chilling. "There's no space between us. We're connected." I didn't reply. I just hit the block button. I blocked his profile, his email, everything I could think of. A wave of relief washed over me. It was over. I could finally breathe again. For a few weeks, everything was blissfully silent. No more constant notifications, no more digital stalking. I started to feel normal again, chalking it up to a bizarre, unsettling online encounter. I was more careful online, locking down my privacy settings and being more vague about my personal life. I thought I had cut him out for good. I was wrong. It started subtly. A flicker of the lights in my apartment. The sound of a floorboard creaking in the other room when I knew I was alone. I brushed it off as my old building settling, my imagination running wild after my experience with Alex. I was probably just paranoid. But the feeling of being watched, a feeling I thought I'd left behind, started creeping back in. One night I was studying late for my midterms. The library was closed, so I was holed up in my apartment, surrounded by textbooks and half-empty coffee mugs. It was almost 2 a.m. My laptop, which was on the other side of the room details on my desk, suddenly chimed with a notification sound. It was the same distinct chime from the old messaging app Alex and I used to use. My blood ran cold. I hadn't used that app in months. I walked over to the laptop, my footsteps tradimental, feeling unnaturally loud in the silent apartment. On the screen was a new message. There was no sender name, just a blank profile. The message itself was only 3 words. "I miss you." I slammed the laptop shut. This wasn't possible. I had blocked him. I had uninstalled the app from my phone. How could he message me? I unplugged my router, cutting off the internet completely. I sat there in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs, listening. The silence was heavy, suffocating. I told myself it was a glitch, a weird bug, anything but him. I tried to sleep, but every creak of the building duck made me jump. Every shadow in the corner of my eye looked like a figure. The next morning, sleep-deprived and on edge, I turned my laptop back on. I had to know if the message was still there. It was. And there was another one sent just a few minutes after I'd shut the laptop. "Don't ignore me." I spent the whole day in a state of high alert. I went to my classes, but I couldn't focus. Every person who glanced my way felt like a threat. I felt his eyes on me everywhere. When I got home that evening, I triple-checked the lock on my door. My apartment had never felt so unsafe. That night I was in bed, trying to lose myself in a book, when I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping. It wasn't coming from the window or the door. It sounded like it was coming from inside my closet. Tap, tap. My breath hitched. I stayed completely still, straining to listen. It stopped. I told myself it was the pipes. It had to be the pipes. Then I heard a voice. A low whisper, so faint I almost thought I'd imagined it. It came from the closet again. "I'm here now." It was his voice. Not a digital, tinny sound from a speaker, but a real, physical voice. It was Alex's voice. I had only heard it a few times in voice notes he'd sent per Tekau before things got weird, but I'd never forget it. It was smooth, calm, and utterly terrifying. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The sound was trapped in my throat. I slowly, silently slid out of bed, my eyes glued to the closet door. I grabbed my phone from the knitstand, my fingers fumbling with the screen. I backed away towards my apartment door, my legs trembling so hard I could barely stand. As my hand reached the doorknob, the closet door creaked open. I didn't wait to see what came out. I wrenched the door open and sprinted out into the hallway, not stopping until I was outside in the cold night air, gasping for breath. I called the police from the street, my voice shaking as I tried to explain that there was someone in my apartment. When they arrived, they searched my entire apartment. The closet was empty. The windows were locked from the inside. There were no signs of a break-in. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and skepticism. They found my open laptop, saw the messages, and suggested I file a report for online harassment. They told me I was probably just stressed from exams, that my mind was playing tricks on me. They didn't believe me, but I knew what I heard. He was there. I never went back to that apartment. I packed my things the next day with 2 friends flanking me and slept on Chloe's couch until the semester ended. I moved to a different city, changed my name online, and deleted nearly every social media account I had. It's been a few years now, and I've tried to move on. I've tried to convince myself it was all a stress-induced hallucination, a waking nightmare brought on by a creepy guy online. But sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet, I'll hear it. A faint rhythmic tapping. And I'm not sure if it's just the old pipes, or if it's Alex, reminding me that no matter how many times I block him, we're still connected.